Today, 33 real historical moments that sound like Hollywood inventions, but actually happened. You'll hear about a dead pope put on trial in 897 and a city drowned in molasses in 1919. We'll hit wars started by a bucket and a battle where Americans and Germans fought together. Every story is packed with dates, names, and the kind of details movies usually soften. Stay for number 33, because one calm decision in 1983 may have saved the world. The dancing plague of 1518. It started as one woman's dancing, then turned Strasbourg into a sweating, collapsing street nightmare. In July 15, 1518, Frau Troffea stepped outside and began dancing without music or warning. Day after day, she kept moving, and neighbors gathered, laughed, then started copying her. Within weeks, officials counted dozens, then hundreds, all jerking and stumbling through cobblestone streets. Doctors blamed overheated blood, so the city did the worst possible thing: hire musicians. They built a platform and encouraged more dancing, like treating fire with gasoline. People fainted from exhaustion, with some reportedly dying from strokes, heart attacks, or heat. Priests marched dancers toward St. Vitus, hoping prayer could stop the invisible rhythm. Nobody knows the true cause, but 1518 Strasbourg still feels like a glitch. 2. The Great Molasses Flood of Boston. A 40-foot wave of molasses hit Boston like a slow-motion demolition, killing people instantly. On January 15, 1919, a massive tank burst near Commercial Street in Boston's North End. The tank held about 2.3 million gallons, owned by Purity Distilling, tied to industrial alcohol. Witnesses heard a roar, then saw a brown wall slam into buildings and elevated tracks. The syrup moved fast at first, dragging wagons, splintering wood, and knocking people down. Then the cold thickened everything, trapping victims like insects in amber, except it was real. Rescuers used axes, salt water, and sheer strength, but boots kept getting stuck. In court, the company tried blaming anarchist sabotage, yet engineers focused on bad construction. For decades, locals swore summer heat still released a faint sweet smell on sidewalks. 3. The Great Emu War in Australia. Australia sent soldiers with machine guns, and the emus still basically walked away victorious. In November 1932, farmers in Western Australia begged help after emus wrecked their crops. Defense Minister Sir George Pearce approved a cull, and Major Gwynedd Meredith led the mission. They brought Lewis guns, thousands of rounds, and even a cameraman for proof. The first ambush near Campion went sideways as birds scattered like smart, zigzagging smoke. When they tried mounting a gun on a truck, the bouncing made aiming almost comical. Meredith later joked each emu seemed to have a battle plan and a personal grudge. After weeks, they confirmed under 1,000 kills, while tens of thousands remained. The operation ended in December 1932, and the emus kept roaming like undefeated locals. 4. The Cadaver Synod, the trial of a dead pope. A dead pope was put on trial, and medieval Rome managed to get even weirder. In January 897, Pope Stephen VI ordered Pope Formosus dug up after 9 months. They dressed the corpse in papal robes and propped it on a throne at Lateran. A deacon answered for the body, while Stephen shouted accusations of perjury and illegal office. Imagine courtroom drama, except the defendant is decomposing and cannot even blink. Stephen declared Formosus guilty, then ordered his blessings and ordinations treated like mistakes. Then they dumped the body into the Tiber River, like a grim political receipt. Soon, Stephen was overthrown, proving this trial was really a power fight with costumes. 5. The Defenestrations of Prague. People literally got thrown out windows, and Europe slid closer to a continent-wide war. In May 1618, Protestant nobles stormed Prague Castle during rising religious and political tension. They grabbed 2 Catholic officials, Jaroslav Bozita and Vilém Slavata, plus Secretary Philip Fabricius. Then they hurled all three out a high window into the castle ditch below. Amazingly, they survived, with Catholics later crediting angels and Protestants crediting manure. News raced across the Holy Roman Empire like a match dropped onto dry hay. Bohemian rebels soon rejected Habsburg rule, and armies started mobilizing across regions. That window toss is often treated like a meme, but it triggered the 30 Years' War. After 1618, European politics felt less like diplomacy and more like siege engineering. 6. The War of Jenkins' Ear. One severed ear became a political prop, and Britain and Spain started shooting ships. In 1731, Spanish Coast Guards boarded British Captain Robert Jenkins near the Caribbean. Years later, tensions boiled, and Jenkins appeared before Parliament holding the preserved ear. It was outrage theater, and it worked, because lawmakers wanted a reason anyway. In 1739, Britain declared war on Spain, and raids flared from Georgia to Panama. Admiral Edward Vernon attacked Portobello, while Spain prepared defenses across colonial ports. The conflict merged into larger European fighting, showing how small stories get weaponized. Jenkins's ear was not the real cause, but it became the perfect symbol. 7. The War of the Bucket. A stolen bucket helped spark a medieval war because pride was heavier than logic. In 1325, tensions simmered between Bologna and Modena, rival Italian city-states in Emilia. After a clash near Zappolino, Modenese soldiers reportedly took a wooden bucket from Bologna. It sounds petty, until you remember symbols mattered like flags, crowns, and sacred relics. Bologna raised a large army to respond, with thousands gathering under communal banners. Modena's forces, fewer but organized, met them and turned the fight into a rout. The battle killed many, and the bucket became a trophy, displayed like a joke. Centuries later, writers mocked the conflict, but the bloodshed was absolutely real. Somewhere a simple bucket still sits in Modena, quietly winning an argument. 8. The Battle of Castle Itter. Allies and Nazis fighting side by side. Americans, Germans, and French prisoners fought together on May 5, 1945, against the SS. Castle Itter in Tyrol held high-profile French captives, including former premiers and generals. As Nazi Germany collapsed, Waffen-SS units threatened the castle, hunting prisoners and defectors. U.S. Lieutenant John C. Lee Jr. arrived with a Sherman tank and a tiny force. German officer Josef Gangl, switching sides, joined Lee to defend the unlikely fortress. Inside, French prisoners grabbed rifles, refusing to hide while SS troops closed in. Machine gun fire cracked stone, and shells shook the castle as defenders ran between walls. Gangl was killed while shielding a French politician, a last act that stunned everyone. When American reinforcements arrived, the SS attack broke, ending history's strangest team-up battle. 9. Operation Mincemeat, the corpse that fooled Hitler. A dead man wearing fake secrets helped misdirect the Nazis and protect an Allied invasion. In April 1943, British planners Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley built a bizarre deception. They used the body of Glyndŵr Michael, dressing him as Major William Martin, Royal Marines. They stuffed his pockets with letters, receipts, and a briefcase chained like real duty paperwork. The body was carried in a container packed with dry ice, preserving him for the mission. A submarine released him off Spain, betting German spies would get the documents first. Spanish officials handled the body, and copies reached German intelligence, exactly as hoped. Hitler shifted resources toward Greece and Sardinia, while the Allies targeted Sicily in July 1943. It worked because the story felt messy, human, and believable, not perfectly staged. 10. The Ghost Army that invented whole armies. 1,000 Americans faked entire divisions, and German commanders moved troops for invisible threats. In 1944 and 1945, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops operated across war-torn Europe. They used inflatable tanks, fake aircraft, and loudspeakers blasting recorded engine noises. Radio operators sent scripted chatter, mimicking unit signatures like a musical impersonation. Artists painted false markings, and soldiers wore fake patches while driving in staged convoys. At night, shadows and distance did the rest, turning rubber into armor in enemy reports. One operation near the Rhine, including Viersen, helped disguise where real crossings would happen. Their mission stayed classified for decades, so veterans went home with a secret that sounded insane. The Ghost Army proved war can hinge on perception, like magic tricks with real consequences. 11. The Night Witches, the World War II bomber unit that terrified Germans. German soldiers feared a whispering sound in darkness made by young Soviet women flying biplanes. In 1942, the Soviet Union formed the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, later the 46th Guards. They flew Polikarpov Po-2 planes, slow wooden trainers that looked outdated even then. To attack, crews cut engines and glided silently, dropping bombs by hand over targets. That sudden whoosh before impact made Germans call them Nachthexen, meaning night witches. Pilots like Nadezhda Popova flew multiple sorties per night, sometimes with bullet holes everywhere. The planes lacked radios and armor, so navigation relied on landmarks, luck, and nerve. Despite disadvantages, the regiment completed thousands of missions across the Eastern Front. Their legend is not fantasy. It is stubborn skill, frozen hands, and relentless night flying. 12. The man who survived 2 atomic bombs. One engineer lived through Hiroshima, returned home, and then watched Nagasaki explode days later. Tsutomu Yamaguchi worked for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and traveled to Hiroshima on business. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., he saw a flash and was hurled away. Burned and half-blinded, he crawled to shelter, then spent the night in an air raid bunker. He reached Nagasaki the next day, bandaged, exhausted, and still trying to explain the nightmare. On August 9, 1945, he reported to work, telling colleagues one bomb erased the city. Mid-sentence, a second flash hit as the boxcar dropped Fat Man over Nagasaki. He survived again, then suffered fever, vomiting, and years of radiation-related health struggles. Japan later officially recognized him in 2009, turning one life into a terrifying timeline. 13. The 1904 Olympic marathon that turned into a medical disaster. An Olympic marathon became a circus of poison, car dust, and near-death collapse in St. Louis. On August 30, 1904, athletes ran on unpaved roads during brutal Missouri heat. Officials provided minimal water, partly because organizers wanted to study dehydration effects. Thomas Hicks, the eventual winner, was given strychnine and brandy by his handlers. Strychnine is literally rat poison, and he staggered like a broken puppet near the finish. Frederick Loers rode in a car for miles, then ran in smiling, briefly winning. Crowds cheered until officials learned about the ride and disqualified him for cheating. South African runner Len Tau was chased off course by dogs, because apparently that happened. The event exposed how early Olympics mixed science, spectacle, and poor judgment in one race. 14. The London Beer Flood. A brewery accident sent beer through London streets, killing people in basements in seconds. On October 17, 1814, a huge vat burst at the Horseshoe Brewery in St. Giles. The vat held porter, and the pressure triggered a chain reaction, bursting nearby containers too. A wave of beer smashed through walls, turning narrow streets into a foamy river. Houses collapsed and low rooms flooded, trapping residents who had nowhere to climb. Several victims were attending a wake, suddenly facing a disaster nobody could imagine. The brewery faced public outrage, yet a court treated it as an unavoidable accident. Some locals reportedly gathered spilled beer, because poverty makes even tragedy practical. London still remembers 1814 as proof liquids can become weapons without any intent. 15. The Great Stink of 1858. London smelled so bad in 1858 that lawmakers fled, and then the city finally built sewers. That summer, heat baked the River Thames, which had become a flowing waste channel. Parliament sat beside the river, and curtains were soaked with chlorine to mask the odor. It didn't work, because the stink was not just smell, it was constant nausea. People argued about disease, still debating miasma, meaning bad air, versus germs. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette pushed a new sewer network, massive and expensive, but necessary. Construction began, channeling waste away from central London instead of into the Thames. Cholera outbreaks had already terrorized the city, making public patience run out. The Great Stink turned disgust into infrastructure, which is history's grossest kind of progress. 16. The year without a summer after Tambora. A volcano in Indonesia helped ruin harvests worldwide, making 1816 feel like a broken season. Mount Tambora erupted in April 1815 on Sumbawa, blasting ash high into the atmosphere. The next year, temperatures dropped, skies looked hazy, and rain kept arriving at the worst times. In New England, frost hit in June, and farmers watched crops die like they were cursed. In Europe, grain failed, prices rose, and hungry crowds blamed leaders and neighbors. Switzerland saw cold, wet days that kept people indoors, fueling strange creative sparks. That gloomy summer inspired Mary Shelley's Circle as they told horror stories near Lake Geneva. People did not know why weather had changed, so rumors spread faster than science. Today, Tambora reminds us one eruption can rewrite global life without sending any armies. 17. The Tunguska explosion that flattened a forest. Something exploded over Siberia in 1908, flattening trees like matchsticks across a giant circle. On June 30, 1908, a blast hit near the Tunguska River in remote Russia. Witnesses described a fireball, thunder, and shockwaves that knocked people off their feet. The explosion toppled millions of trees across about 2,000 square kilometers of taiga. There was no crater, which baffled investigators and fueled endless theories for decades. A 1927 expedition led by Leonid Kulik found scorched trunks standing upright at ground zero. Scientists now favor an airburst from an asteroid or comet fragment, exploding midair. Even without direct impact, the energy release rivaled large nuclear weapons in raw force. Tunguska is the clearest reminder that space sometimes throws punches without warning. 18. The Siege of Tyre and the city that got connected to the mainland. Alexander the Great turned an island city into a peninsula, simply by refusing to quit. In 332 BCE, the Phoenician city of Tyre sat offshore, protected by strong walls. Alexander wanted Tyre's harbor and prestige, but the defenders refused to open gates. So he ordered a causeway built, dumping stones, timber, and rubble into the sea. Tyrians attacked from ships, setting parts of the causeway on fire, slowing progress repeatedly. Alexander responded by bringing a fleet, including ships from conquered cities, tightening the noose. Eventually, siege engines reached the walls, and the city was stormed after months. The causeway remained, changing currents, gathering sand, and slowly reshaping geography over centuries. Tyre still shows how stubborn strategy can literally redraw the coastline. 19. The medieval animal trials that sent pigs to court. In medieval Europe, animals could be arrested, prosecuted, and executed like human criminals. In 1386, a pig in Falaise, Normandy, was tried for killing an infant. The pig was dressed in human clothes because courts love symbolism in public spectacle. Witnesses testified, and the court treated the animal as responsible, not just dangerous. Elsewhere, rats were summoned for crop damage and lawyers argued about their safe travel. Some cases involved church courts, blending religion and law into one strange theater. To modern ears, it sounds absurd, but communities use trials to restore shaken order. These records survive because paperwork lasts longer than common sense ever does. 20. The Pope who was kidnapped by Napoleon. Napoleon arrested the Pope, proving even religion could be dragged into imperial politics. In 1809, French forces seized Pope Pius VII after he resisted Napoleon's demands. The Pope was taken from Rome and moved through Italy, then held in France. Napoleon wanted control over the church, especially bishops and loyalty inside his growing empire. Pius VII refused to cooperate fully, even when isolated and pressured for months. In 1812 and 1813, negotiations produced the Concordat of Fontainebleau, then quickly unraveled. As Napoleon's military situation collapsed, the Pope regained freedom and returned to Rome in 1814. The kidnapping hardened opposition to Napoleon, making him look like a ruler with no limits. It's a reminder that even crowns built on reason still use brute force. 21. The missing princes in the tower. Two boys vanished in 1483, and England still argues about who benefited most. After Edward IV died, his sons Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were lodged in the tower. Their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, became Richard III amid fierce political maneuvering. The princes were seen less and less, then simply stopped appearing to anyone outside. Rumors spread fast because power vacuums create story engines that never shut off. Some blamed Richard III, others hinted at later players like Henry VII after his victory. Centuries later, bones found in the tower were treated as possible princes, but certainty is hard. The case remains famous because it is a mystery wrapped inside a succession crisis. History sometimes leaves blank spaces where a screen should be. 22. The Spanish Armada's weather war. Spain sent a massive fleet in 1588, and storms helped scatter it into disaster. King Philip II launched the Spanish Armada to challenge England and support an invasion plan. The fleet sailed toward the English Channel, facing English ships under commanders like Charles Howard. After battles near Gravelines, Spanish ships broke formation and struggled to regroup. English firepower mattered, but supplies, coordination, and shifting winds mattered just as much. Unable to return through the Channel safely, Spain attempted to circle around Scotland and Ireland. Then violent storms hit, driving ships onto rocky coasts and turning navigation into tragedy. Thousands died from wrecks, exposure, and starvation, long after cannon stopped firing. The Armada's defeat shows weather can be an invisible admiral with perfect timing. 23. The sinking of the Mary Rose and the time capsule battlefield. A Tudor warship sank in minutes, leaving a frozen snapshot of 1,545 life underwater. The Mary Rose served Henry VIII and fought in the Solent near Portsmouth. On July 19, 1545, during battle against French forces, the ship suddenly heeled over. Water rushed through open gun ports, and the vessel went down with hundreds aboard. Survivors later described chaos, with men trapped below as the deck tilted sharply. For centuries it rusted in silt, preserving bows, tools, clothing, and even longbows. In 1982, a massive salvage operation lifted the hull, watched worldwide like a historic surgery. Archaeologists found everything from surgeon's kits to personal combs, because details matter. The Mary Rose is war history told through spoons, arrows, and the shape of ordinary lives. 24. The Black Dinner that inspired a famous fictional wedding. In November 1440, young Earl William Douglas and his brother David arrived at Edinburgh Castle. They were guests of Chancellor William Crichton, under the nominal authority of King James II. A feast began, but servants brought in a black bull's head, signaling death. Their ally Malcolm Fleming was killed too, while political factions rearranged power in real time. The murder shattered trust among nobles, fueling feuds that lasted far beyond one night. Centuries later, writers used the story as inspiration for fictional betrayals and weddings. The Black Dinner proves hospitality can become a weapon when politics turns feral. 25. The 1914 Christmas truce that didn't fit the war. In December 1914, soldiers stopped fighting and met in no man's land, shocking commanders. Along parts of the Western Front, British and German troops heard carols drifting over trenches. Men cautiously emerged, expecting bullets, then saw waves and awkward smiles instead. They exchanged cigarettes, buttons, and small gifts, like humans interrupting a machine. Some accounts mention improvised soccer, though details vary by location and memory. Officers later tried to prevent repeats because fraternization threatened discipline and propaganda. The war soon returned to grinding artillery and mud, swallowing the brief calm. Yet the truce stuck in cultural memory because it exposed the war's absurdity. For one cold night, orders lost to simple recognition. The enemy was also tired. 26. The 1983 Soviet false alarm that nearly started World War III. One officer's skepticism on September 26, 1983, may have prevented a nuclear catastrophe. That night, Soviet early warning systems reported incoming American missiles toward the USSR. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov faced a terrifying choice: report attack or doubt the machine. The screen showed several launches, but Petrov noticed it looked wrong for a real first strike. He reasoned an actual American attack would likely involve many more missiles, not just a handful. So he reported it as a false alarm, despite protocol and enormous personal risk. The alert was later linked to satellite misreading sunlight reflected off clouds. Petrov was not celebrated then because admitting the flaw embarrassed the system. History sometimes hinges on a calm person saying, "No, this doesn't feel right." 27. The Great Fire of London and the myth of burned to the ground. London burned for days in 1666, yet the story is stranger than total destruction cliches. The fire began on September 2, 1666, in Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane. Strong winds pushed flames through wooden houses packed tightly along narrow medieval streets. People fled with carts, furniture, and animals, creating traffic jams while the city burned behind them. St. Paul's Cathedral collapsed, its stone cracking as lead melted and poured like silver rain. Yet large parts of London survived, and the death toll recorded was surprisingly low. Officials debated demolishing buildings to create fire breaks, but hesitation let the inferno spread. Afterward, rebuilding changed regulations, materials, and street planning in the capital. The fire did not erase London, but it forcibly upgraded it, like a brutal reset. 28. The dancing mania epidemics across Europe. Strasbourg was not alone. Europe had earlier outbreaks where crowds danced until collapse. In 1374, parts of the Rhineland saw groups moving through towns near Aachen and beyond. Chroniclers described people shaking, singing, and seeming unable to stop, even when injured. Some collapsed from exhaustion, while others begged priests for help or feared demonic forces. Authorities tried prayers, processions, and sometimes music, repeating the same risky logic. Modern scholars discuss stress, trauma, and mass psychogenic illness, meaning symptoms spreading socially. Famine, disease, and hard winters created pressure cooker conditions, especially in crowded towns. When one person started convulsing, others interpreted it through fear and shared expectations. Dancing manias remind us the mind can turn a community into one nervous system. 29. The Mutiny on the Bounty and the real aftermath. A famous mutiny became a brutal survival saga, ending on a tiny Pacific island. On April 28, 1789, Fletcher Christian led a revolt against Captain William Bligh on HMS Bounty. Bligh and loyalists were set adrift in a small boat, facing ocean, thirst, and death. Amazingly, WWII navigated over 3,000 miles to Timor, proving skill can look unbelievable. Mutineers first tried settling on Tubuai, then returned to Tahiti, splitting into factions. Christian and others fled with Tahitians to Pitcairn Island, burning the bounty to hide. Life there turned violent, with killings and revenge as alliances collapsed in isolation. Years later, a lone survivor, John Adams, became the community's leader and moral authority. The real bounty story is less romance, more desperation, navigation, and human chaos. 30. The Pirate Republic of Nassau. For a few years, pirates effectively ran a government in the Bahamas, and it got organized. Around 1716, Nassau became a haven after wars ended, and sailors lost legal work. Captains like Benjamin Hornigold and later Charles Vane operated openly, dividing spoils and rules. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, passed through, adding fear and reputation to the port. Pirates used agreements called articles, outlining shares, injuries, and discipline like a rough contract. Merchants, taverns, and local officials adapted because money still spends, even if stolen. Britain eventually responded by sending Woodes Rogers as governor in 1718 with pardons and force. Some pirates accepted pardons, others resisted, and Nassau's republic unraveled under pressure. It wasn't a fantasy kingdom, but it was closer to pirate politics than movies admit. 31. The corpse bridge tactic and ancient warfare. Ancient sieges sometimes used bodies as tools, and it was as horrifying as it sounds. Greek and Roman sources describe defenders and attackers using corpses to fill moats or trenches. The idea was grimly practical. Bodies become material when stone and wood run short. In some sieges, attackers piled the dead to create ramps for ladders and siege engines. Defenders sometimes hurled corpses back, spreading terror and possibly disease across battlefields. These acts weren't tactics manuals, but desperate improvisations when time and supplies vanished. It's hard to pin one famous battle because chroniclers often mentioned it as a recurring horror. The point is simple. Ancient warfare was not clean hero duels, it was engineering. If Hollywood showed this reality, audiences would look away, and that tells you everything. 32. The Napoleonic soldier who became king of Sweden. A French marshal became Swedish king because Sweden basically hired competence after a crisis. Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte fought for revolutionary France and rose under Napoleon's expanding wars. In 1810, Sweden needed an heir, and the Riksdag chose Bernadotte as crown prince. He adopted the name Karl Johan and learned Swedish politics while keeping his soldier instincts. By 1813, he joined the coalition against Napoleon, prioritizing Sweden's interests over old loyalties. His armies fought at Leipzig, one of Europe's biggest battles, helping push Napoleon back. In 1818, he became King Charles XIV John, founding a dynasty still on Sweden's throne. Imagine telling a Swedish farmer in 1800 their future king would speak French first. History sometimes swaps bloodlines for resumes when desperation gets loud enough. 33. The exploding whale incident. A dead whale was blown up in Oregon, and the resulting chaos became immortal local comedy. In November 1970, a sperm whale washed ashore near Florence on the Oregon coast. Officials decided to use dynamite to break it up, believing seagulls would handle the rest. A state engineer, George Thornton, suggested explosives, and the plan moved forward anyway. When the charges detonated, huge chunks of whale rained down like greasy meteors. Spectators fled, cars were damaged, and one massive piece crushed a vehicle completely. The remaining blubber still sat there, because explosions do not make biology disappear. The story spread because it perfectly mixes confidence, bad assumptions, and instant consequences. If you want a one-word summary, it's this: physics.